Hey everybody, welcome back to Team Brothership. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm joined here again by the illustrious Bryan Paul of Without Parole, and we're going to talk about retro games again.
The better older brother.
Yeah.
Oh wait, that's not how this works. This is a different show. Yeah. But also true. I'm the better older brother.
That is true. Yeah, you have a younger brother. Although
It's actually not true. I just like pretending. I get to play a persona when I come on podcasts.
Is your brother older than you?
I have 3 sisters. See what I'm saying? Nothing I say today is going to be true.
No, I was going to say that's not true.
Yeah, he is. I have one sibling. He's older.
Oh, okay. Why did I think he was young? Well, whatever. He's like a DJ, right?
Yeah, and that's all the information I choose to give out.
Okay.
Because I don't want anybody tracking down who my family is. I've already had enough issues with stalkers in my life. I don't need any more.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll keep it all. Well, see, I mean, everybody knows that I have a brother because he like hosts the show with me occasionally when he can pry himself away from his 2 children. So, pro tip: 2 children is more complicated than just 1 child times 2.
Really?
It definitely seems like having 2 children like exponentially complicates everything.
I thought you have a kid, you worry a whole lot, you have another kid, and you go, the first one turned out fine. We're doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, there is probably that, but I think it just seems to be, again, I'm the wrong brother to be having this conversation with because I'm the one without children, but just observing him, it definitely seems to be like the second kid. You might be more chill about things, but it's just like the logistics of that make things a lot more complicated.
Yeah, it really ruins, having kids ruins all the time you just set aside for gaming. Yeah. So I think we've done everything right here, Mike.
I agree. I definitely do play a lot more video games than my brother.
That's all I do.
Yeah. And talk about it on YouTube.
And talk about it and edit videos about it.
Yeah.
And write about it.
What is the actual percentage you think of time that you spend like talking about gaming and like editing videos about gaming versus actually gaming?
Editing is 90% of it.
Yeah.
And then like 5% is writing about it, and then writing and talking about it, and then the other 5% is actually playing games. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And then when I'm done with my day, I'm like, because I don't play retro games for a living. I play VR games for a living, and at the end of the day, I find myself being like, well, I still want to play games, but I just don't want to play VR because that feels like work at this point. So that's when the retro stuff comes in. It feels like a completely different thing. Somehow it's the same. It's still gaming, but it feels like a completely different thing. So I feel really fortunate that playing retro games doesn't feel like work, and I think that's why I'm even more passionate about it than I was like when we first met.
Sure. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. You kind of picked the best area of gaming to get burned out on, VR games, because it makes up such a small percentage of everything.
Everyone thinks VR is dead anyway, so it's like, we're just coasting at this point.
Every time I find like videos or other content about VR, it definitely is like the first 10 to 20 comments are like, oh, why'd they write this article or why'd they make this video? VR is dead anyways. But there still keeps being output about it, so like somebody's making games.
Yeah, I mean, my whole career has been about VR gaming, so I don't, if somebody's saying it's dead, well then good for them, I guess, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that they enjoy that I would assume are dead, things I don't care about. It's like, is Pokemon still a thing? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's like insanely popular still, right? But I could just blindly say, oh, Pokemon's dead, and then but that doesn't make it true, Mike. And so just because a lot of people who don't play VR say, oh, VR's dead, doesn't make it true. And unfortunately, a lot of those people who write those kind of things have jobs in editorial positions at different gaming sites, and so we get a lot of people talking about stuff that they don't know anything about, which is fun because then I still have a job.
I mean, I would say a lot of people talking about things that they don't know anything about is kind of a good summation of like all of journalism.
I would say all of people in general.
All of human writing endeavors. Yeah, that probably makes sense. That makes sense. But speaking of retro gaming, yeah, retro gaming. That's what we're going to talk about. That's what this spin-off Splinter show is about.
Yeah.
So
I just found out how bad the SNES version of Aliens vs. Predator is.
Yeah. Oh man.
What? It's not even as good as like other Capcom side-scrolling beat 'em ups, and it's based on like a phenomenal arcade game.
Yeah.
Like just phenomenal. Like how did this turn out so badly?
Well, it's not Capcom. It's shoot, is it? It's one of those like real weirdo companies that had like real hit or miss stuff on the SNES. Is it Human? It might be Human or Seta. That SE. You guys it nearby? You can look at it.
Yeah, like literally within arm's reach. Oh my god, it's published by Activision. I thought it was actually published by Capcom, and they just had somebody else develop it.
No, it's a totally unrelated thing. They completely disconnected. Yeah, that was one of my that was one of the games that I played a ton as a kid, and not like even as a kid I was like, this is bad, but I was like, I want it to be good, and maybe if I play it enough, it will just get good.
So according to Google, Information Global Service developed this in conjunction with Jordan.
Oh.
Jourdn. I've never heard of any of those people.
No, that's not what I thought. I had thought it was something weird like Seta or Human, like one of those companies that made real wacky stuff, but yeah, I guess not.
Yeah. Human's the Clock Tower people, right?
They did a lot of stuff. They did Clock Tower. I think they did that SOS game, that weird SOS game with the. They've done all sorts of like. I feel like I would need to look at a list, but everything that they've done is very like bizarre and unique.
Yeah, their name would pop up randomly on all sorts of stuff back then. But yeah, dude. But oh man, listen. I know that we have a topic in mind, but I do have to say, since the last time we recorded, I've gotten this one of those all-in-one emulation stations.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, so I got it on Amazon, right? It was $250 with a $50 coupon, so $200 all in one. They call it a mini PC. Runs on Windows 11, and it's just like basically like a RetroArch style. What the hell? I can't remember what it's called. But it just covers so many different systems, and it comes preloaded with like 60,000 games. I haven't actually checked the hard drive to see how much free space is left for actually adding my own games in. But dude, it's just been so much fun, and this is the reason I brought up AVP is because this is the first time I've ever played the arcade version of Aliens vs. Predator, like ever.
Oh really? You've never played that?
I had never played it in the arcade. I'd never even seen it in the arcade. I had no idea what to expect. And so playing it and starting off and just like having all of those like was it 20 sprites of xenomorphs?
Oh
like,
yeah,
all on the screen at the same time. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like just had that vibe about it. It was like, oh man, we're really pushing this arcade board to the limits, and I'm just in love with it. So
yeah. Good. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, actually, it's funny you brought that up. Andy of Materia, who I mean you and I know, but who the show he's been on some episodes of the show with me too. He had an Alien versus Predator cabinet set up in his arcade, and it was when I went in there and I saw that, I was just like, this is the right place to be. I think I was actually the last person to beat it before because he swaps out his machines every once in a while, and he said like nobody else was playing it, so he swapped that one out for a different one, and I think the last one to play through it before he took it out of service for a little while.
So what does he do? Does he like just put it into storage and then put a different one in its place, or does he sell it and buy something new?
Yep. No, he doesn't live that far from the arcade, so he can kind of haul stuff, and he's got a truck, so he can kind of haul stuff back and forth. Nice. Yeah, I think he just has them in storage at his house, and we'll just cycle them out. A bunch of them he has like they're kind of more general cabinets that he can just swap the boards out or things like that. But I think that one he had to actually move out. Although that's maybe he did something different, because that's a Capcom one, and they have like I don't know if you've ever seen those like CPS2 boards. They're just like big. Yeah. They look like giant, just giant cartridges.
So cool though, so cool. This is what I love about retro gaming is somehow, no matter what you do, no matter how educated you think you are on a specific system, the arcades, whatever it is, there's always going to be a game that comes along. And little did I know it was going to be something as mainstream as Aliens versus Predator, that like, you just like, oh, wait, how did this get past me? How did I just never see this before? Right? Retro gaming, and then you get in, and like, I think this is actually a pretty decent segue into what we're going to talk about today. Like, this is a game that's been out for 30 years, or no, 25 years. I don't even know. I'm bad.
It's probably been close to 30 years. Yeah. I mean, it would have been mid to late 90s, I think. So yeah, like
right?
25,
so
30
I have
years.
Zero nostalgia for this game specifically. I do have nostalgia, of course, for like side-scrolling beat-em-ups and Capcom games in general, but zero nostalgia. And I dive in and I was like, this is incredible, right? I just like fall in love with it immediately. So why don't you tell people what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. Well, we definitely, as with the last show, we're like, what should we talk about? What should our theme be? We'll just get in front of the camera and start talking. We'll just, get in front of the microphones and start talking. But yeah, we did kind of kick around the idea of talking about, are retro games really as good as we claim them to be, or is it just kind of the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia? Right.
And I'm using this as proof positive. The games were just better back then. I feel old, and I feel like I've got a hunchback, and I've got a cane, and no hair on the top of my head, and I'm just screaming at clouds.
Yeah.
Right. Every time I say, "Oh, games used to be better," but I mean, okay, Mike? Let's pave the ground floor a little bit here. Do you play current gen games?
Oh yeah. Actually, I was just playing the Elden Ring expansion before I came up here to record. Actually, that was why when you said, when do you want to record, I was like, how about now? Because I've been putting off fighting the last boss of that thing because he sucks. It's so bad. Yeah. So I was like, let's go record right now so I don't have to do this.
So then, you've got a pretty good base. You're playing current gen games. You've been playing games like your whole life.
Yep.
Do you think that? And I feel like I just took over the host role. Do you think that games used to be better than they are now?
It's one of those complicated questions. I mean, we met kind of because I used to write for like 1UP and GameSpite and US Gamer and different things like that over the years. And so when you were looking for a co-host, you're like, well, this guy must sort of know what he's talking about. And so I used to be a little more involved in a lot of those communities and like, not just the other writers, like the forums and things too. And I remember there was one day where somebody like, largely retro gaming board. And I remember somebody trotted out like just very off the cuff, like, oh, well, it's all just like old games. It's all just nostalgia. Like, we all know that. Like, just very casually, like, oh, yeah, we all know it's just nostalgia. They're not as good as we, like, modern games are better. And I was like, and a lot of people kind of agreed with him. And I was like, what? No, I don't think so. Like, because like you, I had also had very similar experiences, like the Let's Play that I'm doing as the other, current running thing that we're doing on the channel, the Shining Force 2. I didn't play that until I was in college. Like, I had never been exposed to those games at all. But a friend of mine, who I was a Super Nintendo kid, so he was a Genesis kid. And when we met in college, he was like, "Oh, you like Final Fantasy? Like, you got to try out Shining Force. It's so good." And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, it can't be that good. It's a Genesis game." So I fired it up and I was like, oh, wow, actually, this is excellent and fun. And like, it was one of those games like what you were saying with Alien versus Predator. Like, how did this slip past me for so long? This is so much what I like to play. Like, it was bothering me that a game like that had existed that I had not known about for so long. So depending if you're thinking like, is college still the age where like you're developing your sense of nostalgia? But I feel like I've played all sorts of games, like older games, as an adult now, as a approaching middle-aged man, that like, stuff from 20, 30 years ago I'll play and I'll be like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, this is great.
Yeah, so. I remember even at the time thinking there is a very clear division between older game design and newer game design, and also the the values, seemingly the values that different development studios or publishers hold. I feel like the PS2 era was the last generation where you saw a lot of output from studios, and it was just consistently good across the board. And the games were just awesome. And then the PS3 and 360, that generation rolls around, and things just changed for me. Like I think it might have been the emphasis on, now all these consoles can output HDMI. They're running on HD TVs, right? And so now suddenly it takes a lot more work and a lot more money to create these worlds with these textures and these characters, and they require so many more polygons to look realistic, and now that's something that more people care about than they ever did before. Like, values of gamers were changing, and it just felt like even in the moment there was a clear division happening right in front of me, where I was like, I don't really know, like, if I'm excited by this anymore. Games are just kind of looking better than they used to, and they're touting bigger open worlds and more detailed open worlds than they ever used to before, and that's sort of where the division happened for me. And as stuff progressed, I that feeling never changed. There's certainly examples of great modern games that I've been playing and love and everything, and VR, of course, came along and really reinvigorated things for me, but there's still that line between PS2 and PS3 where, man, it just seems like developers and budgets and output and quality were just always on fire. And I think the PS1, SNES, you look at that type of stuff and you look at how many RPGs Square put out during that time, and the quality was just amazing. How did they put out so many? And then you get to a certain point and they're like, oh, we put out 2 games this generation. You're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. I think you really hit a nail on the head in that way. And I should preface this a little bit by saying, like, I do really like modern games too. Like, well, some of them. I like Elden Ring a lot. You and I have talked about, like, Bloodborne and Dark. Like, all the From Software stuff is excellent. The indie game scene is still great. I loved Cuphead. I love Shovel Knight. Have you ever heard of the game Super Daryl Deluxe?
Super Daryl Deluxe. Yeah, that sounds really familiar, but I can't place it.
Yeah, I did a Let's Play. I did a Let's Play on the channel. It's kind of like it's basically like if you combined, like, if you made Napoleon Dynamite into Symphony of the Night, and then you gave it, like, a Venture Brothers coat of paint. It's really, really good. I did a Let's Play of it, and yeah, like, that's a modern game that came out a few years ago.
Nice.
I loved that game.
Yeah, I feel like we're backpedaling a little bit here, just so people listening and don't know who we are really understand us. I've never stopped playing modern games, never. Right, and in every single generation, I've got a pile of games that I'm like, I really love these. However, there is just something different. I think when you look at something on the PlayStation 1, and like, if I go through and I play, again, any Square RPG on PS1, if you can get past, like, the somewhat dated graphics, which that is kind of where nostalgia kicks in for me, and I go, man, I really love this. I enjoyed this at the time. I still love this. I have fond memories of this, and I hold it close to my heart. I really enjoy that look. But you look and you say, oh man, like, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 were all amazing. They also released tactics and collections of different games. And then you get to PS2, and they released, like, 10, 10-2, and 12, right? And then you get to PS3, and they released 13 and sequels to 13. And I was like, what is going on? It's like, as the years go on, it's just like the output gets slower, and simultaneously the quality seems to dip. And I think that's what I miss, is that, dude, if you pick up an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, which I do all the time, from the late 90s, and you just see, like, oh man, like, 10 bangers were coming out every single month for PlayStation 1. Every single month, 10 bangers, right? And now sometimes we go months without seeing something that, like, really grabs our attention on PlayStation 5. It's, like, just maddening, absolutely maddening.
Yeah, I think, so to kind of get to, answer your question that you'd originally asked me, I think a big part of it is kind of what you hinted at. It's the cost at stake. Like, the game back in the PS2 era, I mean the PlayStation era, and then kind of spilling over into the PS2 era, like, CDs and DVDs were relatively cheap, and the tools that you needed to develop were much cheaper. So there was a lot less at stake for each individual product. Like, that's why I remember when, you've obviously been getting rid of a lot of your collection lately. And like, so me and you and Andy were kind of going through everything, and just like, there was so much stuff on the PS1, which like, I have a pretty big like PlayStation 1 collection, and like, there was so much stuff that I had just never even heard of, just like these total weirdo games, or like real unusual ports of like PC games and things, because it was just so cheap to develop. Like, the risks were so low, and like the cost, back then a brand new game was like $40. And so like, that was where, like, in earlier generations with the SNES, the NES, the Genesis, like, development process was a little bit more expensive. The equipment that you needed to make cartridges was a little bit more expensive. But I think as time went by, and kind of everyone was chasing like the graphics train, the hype, and as more and more people got into gaming, I think it's very similar to what's happened to like mainstream cinema. Like, now everything is a Marvel movie. Like, every movie ends with like a giant battle with two huge armies just like running at each other like crazy people. And like, that's kind of what's happened with gaming too, because it's so expensive to make a AAA game. And actually, going back to what you were saying about the PS3, like, that was the first generation where I remember that was, for a while, I don't think I was a fanboy, but I did kind of hate the PlayStation 3 for a while, because it seemed like all of these great, like, mid-tier studios would have, like, one flop as a PS3 exclusive, and then just done. Studio's done. That's the end of it. Like, was it Factor 5? The Rogue Squad Factor 5 with Lair, Free Radical with Haze, and I feel like there were a number of other. Actually, Haze is like one of the one games that I have on the shelf behind me right now. But like, because the costs have been so astronomical that if you have one stinker, like, that's it. You're done. So I think a lot of studios, and that's just kind of doubled down with each. Like, it's so crazily expensive to make like a new cutting edge PS5 game. Like, how long and how much money did it take to make Final Fantasy 16? Like,
I don't know specifics, but I definitely have quite a few developer friends who, clearly point to, development times for AAA games being 6 years, and hundreds of millions of dollars, which is
that's like a movie.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's. For me personally, it all comes down to taste. It's like, what are you interested in, and what do you want from a game? And if you want the most realistic worlds, and you want every single blade of grass to be moving in the wind, and you want dynamic wind to be affecting these things, and time of day changes, and the shadows to be absolutely perfect, then like, yeah, great. Like, modern gaming's for you. But, I would take, and I know that people will point to, the rise of indie games.
I was actually just thinking about that.
Right? To say, hey, listen, like, if you really liked Parasite Eve on PlayStation 1, if you really liked, Chrono Trigger on SNES, if you really liked, like, then there are people making those style of games now. But I think those people might be missing the point, right? We were pushing the limits of the systems that these things were on.
Yeah.
At the time, and we were still, so it was cutting edge for the time, and we were still getting this amazing output with great writing and great stories being told. And so now it's as if the tools didn't evolve fast enough with the times, with the console generations. And so now what you're left with is the only way to make a AAA game is to have hundreds of people on staff. Meanwhile, a lot of these amazing games that we loved from back in the day, they were like 2 or 3 people at the helm sometimes. And so that's kind of what bugs me a little bit, is that stuff hasn't kept up with the times. But the indie game scene is amazing. And so if you're willing to dive deep and willing to really look into what's coming out for these new modern systems, you're going to find a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of stuff that will probably satisfy whatever you're craving. From action games to RPGs, they're all out there. So in a sense, it's never been a better time to be a gamer.
Yeah.
But I just don't personally I just don't personally have the love of the new stuff that I had for the love of the new stuff when I was younger.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of like, I mean, I almost feel like it's like finding good music. Like you're not gonna find good music on the radio or on like whatever. Like you have to do
Right.
you have to do some diving to find. Like there's still tons of good music out there, but like you
Right.
definitely have to do a little bit more legwork for it. Yeah. I do think the indie scene is really fantastic, and I think that's kind of where, they're stepping back a little bit. They're saying like maybe the truth of the matter is that this high-end technology is actually like kind of bad for gaming. Like maybe I when I was in college I took some poetry classes, and I remember one of the professors that I had talking about like why, like what makes poetry so good is it's like in a poem, in a novel, you've got like thousands and thousands and thousands of words. So if you have like a couple of bad words, like it's not gonna, like, I don't mean bad words like profanity. I mean like bad words like, or like slurs. Like bad words is in words that are not, not really ideal for the situation. Like you're not gonna ruin the novel if you use like a few crap words in different places, where like a poem is like 40 words. If you use one or two bad ones, like that's gonna ruin the poem. And so like if you limit your tool set, it forces you to be more creative in that regard, which is like I remember there was an article I read years ago that was like hyper analyzing the sprite work of Chrono's mom's kitchen, and just like going over the sprites and just being like, look at all like the little glasses on the shelves and like the mugs and like her sponge on the side of the sink and all this stuff. And it's like, and you only have like 4 pixels to convey that. And it's like, so if you have like one that's not quite the right color, it's going to look like crap. But like you look over this little perfect sprite work kitchen and it's like, wow, that looks gorgeous. And it's like, and you know exactly what everything is. You can pick out all the plates and the mugs and the sink and everything. But like the skill that requires, because like you didn't have, hyper realistic 3D graphics with textures. Like you just had, a handful of colors that you could put in little squares to make things make sense.
Right. Yeah. In a perfect world, I would love to just hit the brakes and let everything come to a screeching halt for like another decade, right? Let the creator tools get caught up to current gen standards, and let make it easier for 1 or 2 people to make this amazing game. And so, and I think that's happening too. I also think that like AI is playing a big part in that as well.
Yeah,
kind of as these like assistant tools, to making it easier for these small teams to get these bigger projects done.
Yeah.
Which is all great to an extent, right? How long is it before we just get a game that's completely developed by AI and
I think they have those
typing
already.
in prompts.
Yeah. Called Call of Duty.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It comes a lot to preference, and I don't know, man. Like, and maybe I feel it's funny because as we're having this conversation, I actually feel like I'm talking myself out of the argument that I came in here to make, and being like, man, like gaming really is better than ever. And if I really just wanted to focus on it, I can get this and that, and blah blah blah, whatever. And so I don't really know, man. I don't really know. It's I just absolutely love, kind of going back to where this whole conversation started. I just absolutely love that, like, somehow retro gaming never ceases to stop impressing me. We get, going in and diving into the archives, and even this silly retro machine that I bought. I was going back and playing. I mentioned on last week's episode that I grew up playing Commodore 64 games, but I haven't played any of those games since I was 7, 8, 9, something like that. Like we haven't had a Commodore 64 in my life for 35 years. And so having access to like 3,500 of them, just going through the list and playing ones I've never heard of before and playing ones that were favorites of mine when I was a kid, and just absolutely loving them. But then along the way, finding new stuff that I just don't know anything about. Retro gaming is this never-ending well of discovery somehow, even though it's limited. It just keeps delivering. So I feel very fortunate that we're living in this time where it's like, oh, if you want some new stuff, you got new stuff, but you can constantly go back to the well and find stuff that just somehow missed entirely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's really exciting. And like, and I do think, obviously, like, I think we both kind of came in here with the idea of, like, no, it's not nostalgia. Like, retro games are good, and for the reasons that we've articulated. I mean, sure, there are some stuff, like I loved the NES game Yo Noid when I was a kid.
It was a good game. Wasn't that like something else in Japan? And then
It
they just
was.
did a sprite swap?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not that great of a game. It's definitely kind of chunky, but like it but I still like it. But I can acknowledge like that kind of thing is nostalgia.
Right.
But I think there were a lot of, like what we talked about, a lot of ways that things were a little bit better then, because the focus was on maximizing the output of the tools, as opposed to just having like super high and dynamic graphics that are going to really tax the processor and that are going to take like 100 million hours to design.
Yeah, I'd like to see a world where, I'm always looking at Sony because that's my beat.
Sure.
For my job, and so I'd like to see Sony has 19 first party studios currently. That's after shutting down a couple recently. 19 first party studios. I would love to see one or two of those switch to a different model, or find a division within Naughty Dog, find a division within Insomniac that makes single A games instead of triple A games, and does them 2 years. 2-year development cycle, create a nice little engine for yourself where things look good enough, and then tell some really nice stories within that engine, and with the understanding that these are not AAA games, these are not $70 games, these are $40 games, and that they're coming out much faster from a much smaller team. I would love to see that from Sony themselves, because they've sort of backed themselves into this corner where everything they do has to be this quadruple A game that costs $100 million or more to make, and then one failure, very much as you're talking about on PlayStation 3, one failure shuts these studios down because that's all they've done.
Yeah.
Right. So like create these little buffers within these groups so that, hey, you can keep producing these like smaller single A games, and we all just understand that you're there to tell a good story and there to tell was stuff that's more focused on gameplay than blowing you away graphically. And I think I would be a much happier PlayStation gamer because of it.
Didn't Microsoft kind of do some stuff like that? Didn't they have their it was a little more like their indie marketplace, or like I feel like they had some studios that they're like kind of dialed it back, have them make some more like retro styled games.
I remember Recore feeling like that. If you're familiar with Recore, that very much felt like, oh, we are taking like really make like triple I, single A, something along those lines. Certainly not, even though they're funded by Microsoft, it just wasn't. Yeah, it certainly was not a bigger title for them.
Yeah, and I feel like there have been a handful of times. With you had mentioned Square, obviously now Square Enix. I feel like there is. Japanese companies are famously opaque, and like it's hard to get information out of them as far as like actual like business dealings and relationships and things. But I feel like there's a division within Square Enix that is also kind of fighting in that direction, because they've got they had those 2 Octopath Traveler games, which are gorgeous games, but they're sprite largely sprite work. And then I think they used essentially the same engine to do the Live Alive remake, which was also excellent. And now it looks like they're doing something fairly similar with Dragon Quest III. Right. I think they're doing that remake. And actually, interestingly, when Dragon Quest XII, their last big Dragon Quest game, I played that on the Switch, and the Switch version of that has an option where you can play it retro style, and it gets rid, like it scraps the whole graphical engine, and you play through the whole game like a 16-bit Dragon Quest.
No way.
Yeah, I had no idea about this, so I fired it up to play it, and that came. They're like, "What do you want to play with modern graphics or in retro mode?" And I was like, "What is retro mode?" Like, okay, I'll try that. And it like boots up, and it looks exactly like a long lost sibling of like Dragon Quest VI for the Super Famicom, and it was so good. It was like, because the battles just like flew along, town exploration. You're like in and out. You're not having to like run hundreds of in-game miles to get places. It's just like zip zip zip. That's like and that's a huge game too, so that's like an enormous time saver as well.
So I'm assuming that the next time you load it up, you can load it up and be like, oh no, I want the modern graphics.
Yep.
And then you have your same saves game with all the leveling and all the items that you've collected.
Yeah, you have to. There are some, like, there's a certain checkpoint system, so you can't just. It's not like what was that? The remake of Wonder Boy, where you could like hit the button and it would like go. That. Yeah, that was awesome too. But it's not quite like that. Like, you have to do it at certain checkpoints. But yeah, you can totally jump back and forth between retro mode and modern mode.
Man, all the LucasArts re-releases, remasters that they had done with like Full Throttle. And Grim Fandango. You could just hit select on the fly and swap back and forth between the retro and modern graphics. And dude, 100% prefer the retro graphics, right? I'd rather see the pixels than to see the modern polish. But I would switch back every single scene. Like, I just had to see, like how they modernized it every single scene. That was a lot of fun. I think they did that with the Monkey Island collection too.
Yep.
1 and 2.
Yep. Yeah, when they did really 1 and 2. Yeah, those were really good too. Yeah, it's. I mean, for me, especially as somebody who plays a lot of RPGs, that's definitely what I miss about retro games, is that they just moved so much faster. And like, even I know we were talking about the PS2 era as the last like really classic era, but even some of those games are a little bit of a slog compared to like, playing a 16-bit Dragon Quest. You're like in and out of battle in a couple of seconds, and you're on with your day.
Oh, even PS1, compared to the 16-bit era, they were so really trying to impress you with like all the summons and all the different battle animations, and and suddenly there's load times between battle, like just to kick off the battle or to get back to the world map, and so like it certainly wasn't it wasn't a road that was smooth sailing the entire time. We definitely dealt with hurdles the entire time, but I agree with you, man. I agree with you. For whatever reason, when you brought up Square, it really made me wonder something. I don't know if this is a long conversation or a short conversation, but do you think Japanese games are back? Because they seem to kind of disappear for a very long time, and that was a sad time in gaming, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think that's just us being like xenophobic Americans or anything. Like, I think that is demonstratively true during the era, like basically like the PS3 and the Xbox 360 era, and I think that had to do a lot with like mostly business practices of Japanese development studios. Like, I know they tended to not want to reuse it. Like, they would develop engines for every single game, which like really slowed things down, where in the US it's like, oh, everybody just used the Unreal Engine, so it speeds things up. Where I think now they've realized, like, well, if we don't start, get out of there, cat. I think they realized, like, well, if we don't start using kind of generic engines, we're going to be out of business soon. So they got over that. I think so. It does seem like the Japanese industry as a whole, has taken a few steps to kind of like modernize things in a way that's helpful and has kind of helped them step up their game a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling. I mean, I think I really think Microsoft's had a lot to do with this. Back when they introduced the Xbox, famously, no Xbox has sold that well in Japan. It's basically like a dead market over there, and so like, I think they had to kind of be at the forefront, like funding studios here that would actually make games for their console.
Yeah.
And building up some first party teams to do so too. Again, I feel like we do these things and we come across as like haters of all sorts of things, right? But like, but I think so many changes and so many things that have happened in the industry, like Microsoft joining, like it's all been good for competition. Competition's always good for the industry, and just introducing things at different times. Microsoft's introducing like hard drives into consoles was like massive, right? Yeah. And so I think, and then even when I remember when were you an OG Xbox gamer?
I was, yeah. I mean, I definitely preferred the PS2, but I was in college at the time, and a lot of folks had Xboxes, and we all liked Halo. That's actually where my brother got into Halo. My brother works. Did we talk about my brother works for Bungie now? So
yeah. I don't think we talked about it here though.
Yeah, so he's the original Xbox is literally responsible for my brother having the job that he does today. So
nice. I have no idea where we're going with this. Maybe you don't either. I don't know.
We were going to talk about that I beat Master of Darkness the other day. Speaking of retro games.
Nice. Yeah, you sent me that text and I never responded. Did you play it on Game Gear?
I did. Yes, I played Master of Darkness on the Sega Game Gear. Well, I mean, I played it on the analog, but it was the Game Gear version of that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fine. Speaking of nostalgia for retro games, it's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever completed that game. I know that somewhere I have. I'm guessing on my Win3 GPD, I have a save state for that game that I've been plugging away at every so often. And it's absolutely cheating when you do. Okay, wait, is that cheating? This was a conversation a while back.
Yeah.
If you use save states and then you finish a game using save states, do you call it cheating?
I guess it depends. If you are just using it as like a checkpoint so you can go back, because I mean that's the reality is like I don't have 4 hours to sit and like play through some game. Like if you're using it as like a checkpoint, then I don't think it's cheating. But if you're using it to like cheese it past difficult points, if you just like keep reloading your saves, then yeah, that's kind of cheating.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there's a little bit more nuance to this than I thought originally. But I mean that's the only way I've ever beaten Castlevania 1 on the NES is to just save every 5 seconds. And every time you get through like a difficult area, you save again, and it's just it's like, oh, I didn't make this jump 3 times in a row, but let me keep reloading the save that's right before that jump.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Mike Matei from Cinemassacre took a lot of crap for saying, use save states, do whatever you want to, play retro games however you want to. But if you use save states, don't say you beat the game. You didn't beat the challenge. Like you've cheated your way through it. Like and I feel the same way, and because that's how I've finished a lot of games. But there's no way that I conquered the challenge that developers put out there for me. But I like the way you phrased it though. If you're just using it as like a as a checkpoint and not saving every 5 seconds like I was, there's a difference there.
Yeah, and also like the reality, like who cares? You're having fun with it. Like who are any of these people trying to impress? Like you're just enjoying your games. Like whether you can say you beat it or not, like what does it matter? It's fine.
I don't know.
Did you have fun? Then you won.
Not really. I don't love Castlevania games the way most people do. Most people will be like, "Oh man, Castlevania 4 is the best game in the series," and I'm like, "And I'm sorry, Castlevania wasn't good till Symphony. I apologize for all the people I just gave a heart attack to, but yeah, Castlevania wasn't good till Symphony, and and all the next 6 games that followed on GBA and DS were all fantastic."
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I do tend to prefer. I like some of the original Castlevania stuff too, but I definitely like the post Symphony output a lot more.
Yeah. They're all good games. I just like to get under people's skin. And I've actually never played through the seemingly best one of the 8-bit era, which was Castlevania 3. I've never played through it ever.
I also have not played through. I've definitely played more of pretty much every other Castlevania, including like Bloodlines and the weird like PlayStation remake one. But yeah, Castlevania 3 is like really, really hard. Like you know, all of those old games, like the Nintendo hard thing going on, but like I was shocked at like how quickly Castlevania 3 got really difficult.
Really interesting. Well, I'm down to play it before next week's episode, but I will be using save states the entire way.
That's
cheating
fine.
My way through it.
That's fine.
Yeah. I actually tried to play through Bloodlines recently on Genesis, and I was like, why is this game so easy? So easy. And then everything came to a screeching halt. And yeah, and then suddenly it got really hard. I was like, oh crap, this game was super easy until it wasn't. And now I'm screwed. So I haven't seen all that game all the way through either.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I got pretty far into that one, but I've never beaten it either. There's a lot of those older games, they take it easy on you like the first 2 or 3 levels, and then they're like, okay, you understand what you're doing, you're comfortable, all right, here's the real game now.
Yeah, now you're dead.
Yeah, oh god. Where that's kind of what I was expecting from Castlevania 3, but like they come out swinging like right out of the gate.
Oh man, that's cool. Well, I'm like I said, I feel like we should have homework assignments after every single episode.
Oh god.
Right? just like throw a game out there where, like, you know, over the, you know, even if we're not expected to finish it for the next episode, you know, maybe like for the next 2 episodes or something. And then we go like, oh hey, we finally played this game that we should have played 35 years ago. What's your modern take on this really old game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's good. It's
yeah. Oh, I have complete faith that it's awesome. Because I have friends who, you know, call it one of their favorite games of all time, and absolutely the best Castlevania game on the NES.
Have you played the 2 Bloodstained games that are like the retro styled ones? The Curse of the Moon 1 and 2.
Is it Curse of the Moon?
I think so. Yeah, I get it mixed up because they're both
Circle
Bloodstained.
Of the Moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played quite a bit of the first retro inspired one. I have no idea how far into it I got, but I've never touched the second one.
Yeah,
first one was good.
Yeah, I beat the first one, and I think I got probably half to 2/3 of the way through the second one.
The first one's not supposed to be terribly long, right? It's like supposed to be sort of this bonus little hour, 2-hour adventure or something.
Yeah, you can definitely knock that out in an afternoon if you're like playing hard. Yeah, and it's definitely like a total knockoff of Castlevania 3. Like the characters almost exactly mirror the 4 Castlevania 3 characters.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's
so
good.
When are we getting Splatterhouse 4? That's my only real question about retro gaming.
Oh man, probably never, because I think that other one did really badly, right? The remake,
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, listen, it's a guilty pleasure for sure. This is the PS3 360. If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, the updated Splatterhouse with the 3D graphics and all of the kind of quick time events for the finishing moves, and which, listen, total guilty pleasure. But I had a blast with that.
Yeah,
I had a blast with that, especially since I was unlocking like the original games as I went.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's the real key. No,
I mean, but there's so many different studios, like, you know, remaking, making like, you know, new retro versions of like Double Dragon games and Contra games. This is, I think a property that needs to be relooked at and create a proper, you know, Splatterhouse 4 in the Splatterhouse 1 or 2 style. I think that would be phenomenal, especially like, you know, if they do it the Shovel Knight way, where they say, hey, we're using like the 16-bit look, but we're making it in widescreen and doing all sorts of effects that you couldn't do. You know, throw me some guts onto the screen as I kill people.
Yeah, that'd be great. Like, right? Yeah, it's like it's a Turtles in Time when you can throw the guys at the screen. What I was thinking. So instead of hitting the guys into the background where they splat against the wall, they fly forward in the camera.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
This is what needs to happen. It's a $1 million idea, Mike. Who do we talk to?
Yeah, whoever, Mr. Namco.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Such a recluse. It's hard to get in touch with.
I know. That's the tough part, I think, is that Namco, some of these other places like Konami and Technos doesn't exist anymore, and some of these other places seem pretty happy to like share the rights or loan out the rights to different things. But I don't know about Namco. They're still going strong, so they might be a little more reluctant to lend out any of their properties.
If anyone from Namco's listening, bring Ridge Racer to VR, you cowards. It's exactly what we need. We've got Gran Turismo 7, and it is like an amazing sim racer. But we need like something like Burnout or Ridge Racer, like some crazy arcade racer in VR.
What about Splatterhouse in VR, where you actually have to like pull the guts out?
Listen, I've already destroyed one Polymega by throwing my fists around in VR. I don't want to destroy another one.
No more VR punching games.
No, I'm actually. This is completely of no interest to anyone listening. But I am about to be able to put my bed back in the bedroom because of now the collection's gone, and so suddenly I'm going to have like this 6 foot by 6 foot area of space where I can just play VR with no fear of stretching my arms out and never hitting anything and never backing into anything. I can just literally play VR the way it's meant to be played.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, do we want to? We're going for about 50 minutes. Do we want to wrap up? Did you have any final remarks about retro games?
Yes, my final remarks are that I've said a lot of bad things about the PlayStation 3 era and beyond, and I have so many great memories of so many awesome games of that era. Like I just look to my right, and I have the collector's edition of Ni no Kuni on PlayStation 3.
Oh, yeah.
And man, I love that game so much, right? And so like I just want to make sure that when as we say goodbye to everybody this week, that like. That we go off on a positive note.
Oh, yeah.
And we say, that there's awesome stuff and very memorable moments on every console that I've ever had, including the Atari Jaguar.
That was literally going to be my question. Even the Atari Jaguar.
Yeah. Listen, I am the guy that played as much as possible of Resident Evil 2 on the Gamecom. Okay.
Wow.
Like. This is how much I love gaming, right? So I will suffer through bad systems to play good games, and so yeah, I've got nothing but love for all these consoles. I just just an old man and really reflecting back and remembering how much gaming was so exciting at one point, and how it's just less exciting now is all. And I think that might have something to do with my age. I think if there's kids out there who are like 15, 16, 17, and they're just getting a PlayStation 5 for the first time, they probably have the same excitement about games on that system that I had when I was younger. And so I do very much understand that I am like old man screaming at clouds right now. But I'm, obviously, I want to know like who else feels the same way. I don't know if we got any comments or any views on the last episode of this, but I hope that if anyone's made it to the end of this episode, Sirens on my end, that we see some comments from you guys and let us know if you feel the same way about video games, or if we just seem like crotchety old men.
Yeah. No, we got some decent views on the last one. I don't know if anybody commented or not, but we'll see.
Were there pity views? Is there any way to tell that at the end? Do the analytics tell you if it's pity views?
If it's out of pity, yeah, probably a lot of pity views. But yeah, no, I mean, the Team Brothership as a channel, I've always wanted things to be, and I think Paul feels this way too, to be more like positive and just like there's enough people like being angry and screaming about video games on the internet. We don't need more of that. But yeah,
that is all of video games now. That's all it is.
It is literally just people screaming about things. Which, hey, more power to you. I guess if I could make a living that way, maybe I would do it too.
No, absolutely not. It seems like such a horrible way to live life.
Yeah, just angry at recreational entertainment all the time. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of the PS3 and the Xbox 360 as well. It's just we're just talking about the reality that some things changed around that time, and that is truth. Whether they change for the better or for the worse, I suppose, is a little more subjective. But yeah,
for sure.
Cool.
Mike, thanks for having me on again. This is it's always fun to reconnect and hang out and talk about our favorite subject.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, thanks for finally joining me once again on this this journey. All right, folks. Well, hopefully you had a good time with us today. So until next time, I've been Mike.
Do I say my name?
Usually, yeah. I mean, you don't have to. I could say it, I guess.
Well, since I've been lying about everything else this week, I have 14 sisters. I'm the youngest of 1,000. Yeah, I'm Bryan Paul from Without Parole.
All right, and we will see you real soon. Have a great week, everybody.